Just like that, the actual football season is finally over. Sad, sad day. And holy cow, what a Super Bowl. Just so many memories that we're all going to have forever about Kansas City and Philadelphia. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Guys, I'm sorry. Even on this Monday version of the podcast, we don't have time to go through everything that happened in the Super Bowl. You don't get to talk about it, Bill.
I'm either very happy or very sad.
Are you? As you might have guessed.
I don't know. Can you really be sad? The Eagles won a Super Bowl in the last few years. Like, can it be sad? I mean, you can be like, dang, that's annoying. But like, they did win a Super Bowl. You've got the stupid Phillies have won World Series. Like, you've gotten everything your heart could ask for as a sports fan in the last few years. Why do you get to be sad?
Because I like a title if I can get one.
Fair.
Yeah.
As you might have guessed, it is Sunday afternoon, and we all had wonderful Super Bowl festivities to get to. So we decided to make the Monday another position review / preview as we cram it all into one, thanks to the compressed schedule, and look ahead to 2025 for Ohio State at running back, while also back at what Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins gave the Buckeyes on the way to the national title, which was phenomenal, and Bill is going to be pretty difficult to replace.
Yeah, I don't know that plan could have worked any better for Ohio State this year. It was I guess like throughout the year there were times where it was like, it doesn't feel like the running backs are doing a whole lot. They just sort of like got their carries, went about their business. There were a couple of highlights in there for sure, but not a super like prolific season, I guess, for either guy through the first 12 games. And then the playoffs hit, and you're just like, oh, this is why that felt that way. Because I'm stealing this from Joel Klatt. He said at the Ryan Day when they had their conversation, whenever that was, a week or so ago. But he said that, and I agree with, like, Ohio State's entire plan of let's try to cut down on the number of plays. Let's make sure we're fresh when we get to the playoff. I don't know that showed up more than like anywhere else than it did at running back. It was just very apparent to me that both Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson were as fresh as players could possibly be as they played their 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th games. And oftentimes just kind of seemed like they were playing at a different speed from everybody else on the field. Travion with his burst and Quinshon with the physicality and just kind of stiff arming guys into the dirt a time or two. So very, very difficult shoes to fill. But at the same time, I think Ohio State has to feel pretty good about the blueprint that it laid out this past season, because I'm assuming they're going to try to copy that more often than not moving forward.
A lot of teams are going to try to copy that, I think. But this goes back to like the insanity of this last season for Quinshon and Travion obviously starts in December when the first conversations about Quinshon Judkins and Ohio State started. And most people, reasonable people, were like, there's no way that both those two are going to be in the same backfield together. And then they're like, yes, I want that. And we should have probably known that about Travion based on how his recruitment went. But for Quinshon, this is a guy who's getting like 450 carries a year at Ole Miss, to then make the decision to come to Ohio State, knowing that Travion was returning. And then for Tony Alford to leave in March, like the decision that Ryan Day made with Carlos Locklyn, I wonder how different this year goes if Carlos Locklyn's not the running backs coach, because the attitude that Travion Henderson had this year, the blocking, the physical nature of things, like we'd never seen that from him before. But then you look back and you're like, okay, they each had 1,000 yards rushing. They each had more than, they each had double-digit touchdowns. Travion Henderson had 50 less carries than Quinshon Judkins, and yet he had 50 less yards like on the ground. It was really a remarkable season. And we talked throughout Travion's career about how he could be a guy that Ohio State really took advantage of in the passing game. And he did that as a freshman, and then they abandoned it. And then this year, it's like, poof, here it is again. And I think there's an argument to be made that both of those two, that they might be the top two running backs taken in the NFL draft.
Well, it was a long game. They spent 3 years hiding that screen game so they could unveil it in the Cotton Bowl and beat Texas with it. I mean, it's just brilliant long-term game plan. I think the other part that you mentioned, Berm, is like I think there's a good conversation to be had about Carlos Locklyn and the impact that he had after arriving in April. but I don't know that you can say we'd never seen that physicality from Travion Henderson before. I just don't think we had ever seen it like smartly and safely and effectively used, because he was like running his head into people and knocking himself out or playing through injuries. Like I don't think there was ever an issue of him being afraid of contact or not playing with that level of physicality. It just was not really applied in the best way.
No, I mean it more without the football, of course. I mean, the things he's done with the ball in his hands over the last couple of years, I think we've all been like, if he can just stay healthy, he's dynamic. If he can just stay healthy, he's a freak. And then you see him stay healthy, but then you also see that physicality as it pertains to the blocking game and what he became. I mean, outside of Ezekiel Elliott in 2014 and 2015, have you seen an Ohio State running back that physical in the blocking game is in the last 10 years? Because I haven't.
I think Chip Trainum was pretty good at that. And did.
I don't consider him a running back. He was.
Well, that's fine. No, that's fine. If we want to say he's a hybrid tight end and jackknife, by all means, I'm okay with that conversation too. But I agree with the premise that both of those guys were willing to stand in there and help Will Howard in pass protection, which is the overlooked part of their game, because the speed and touchdowns and breakaway ability and Quinshon's stiff arms and Travion did that too. Like, all those things are what's going to get attention. But I think from the NFL talent evaluators perspective, if they're going to go 1 and 2, part of that is going to be their willingness to use their bodies without the football in their hands. And they both did that really well, which again sets the bar very high going into 2025.
Yeah, they're both three down backs, I guess, which is not a term you apply all that often to college football. It's more of a pro football term, but I think both those guys showed that they have it, and I think Ohio State certainly desires that from whoever is playing running back, and that is an underrated part of both their games, what they did without the ball in their hand. Because was it the Texas game where Quinshon like blocked for Travion on the perimeter and put a guy on the ground? Like, that was, yeah. I just don't. I think it's hard to find running backs who are as good as these two guys are with the ball in their hands to just be like, oh yeah, I'll go block, sure, no problem. Like what? Because like why would you want to do the dirty work necessarily when you're trying to preserve yourself to be a star when you have the ball in your hand? So Ohio State has a good culture, I guess, in its running back room in that way, that it has been able to get a lot of guys with some serious talent to play that way. But now that is part of the charge, I guess, for the guys who are stepping up is, yeah, we need you to try to find a way to make up for this rushing production that we're losing. But there's a physicality and a mindset at the position probably where things need to start for James Peoples, CJ Donaldson, and all the other young guys in that room who were stepping up.
The question is, who are the other young guys in that room?
Yeah,
I think for most people, it is so interesting to me as position by position as we go through this. I don't know that there is a position group on the Ohio State roster, maybe not in America, that's going to go from being as well known to as unknown as the Ohio State running backs. When you take Quinshon and Travion, who are both former, obviously Travion's a 5-star. You got Quinshon on the cover of NCAA Football 25 as a SEC rushing leader for 2 years. And then you go to James Peoples and CJ Donaldson, and that's it. Like, this is a question. I mean, there's some speculation or some uncertainty about whether or not Sam Williams-Dixon is going to return to Ohio State. We have not seen any move from him in the transfer portal. When he announced he was going into the portal, he initially had planned on not staying with the team and then stuck with the team through the playoff. And because of that, did not visit anywhere else and is still floating in the ether. I don't know if he's going to be there through spring. And that would certainly be pretty beneficial for Ohio State. But the question is, Bill, let me ask you this, because I know you're the ball watcher. Is CJ Donaldson, we know he's big.
He's a ball knower. I watch ball. Okay.
Okay. So Bill's a ball knower. Austin's a ball watcher.
Yes.
CJ Donaldson, we know he's big. He's like Rod Smith, Derrick Henry type of big, like 6'3", 235-pound running back. Does he do the dirty work, or is he just a big running back?
I don't know if not doing the dirty work is allowed in Carlos Locklyn's room. So like I would say that maybe sometimes you watch CJ Donaldson and like I think he's played at 640 pounds in the past. I think he's a little lighter than that now, but still north of 230. Maybe you
640.
So sorry, 240. 240.
I thought at first you were saying that's how many snaps he played, and then he just kept going.
240 pounds. My apologies. Maybe you want to see some more blocking prowess there. I think the physical profile and the tools are there, and I think Carlos Locklyn will do a pretty good job molding that into a guy that's going to handle his business blocking. So I'm not super worried about that. Like I would say, based off what I've seen, that Travion Henderson is certainly a better blocker than CJ Donaldson has been, and Quinshon Judkins probably the same conversation. But I have a lot of faith in Carlos Locklyn to get CJ Donaldson to where he needs to be.
I enjoyed watching some of the clips of Donaldson because they reminded me of Chip Trainum in a lot of, like, he's a little bit bigger, but he made a play, I think it was against Pitt, Bill, like out of the backfield, like on a little wheel route, and had to adjust to a ball behind him. So he showed some ball skills there. He's got not amazing breakaway speed, but enough to make you pay if he gets to that second level. Showed some of the stiff arm. I think he runs through contact pretty well. There was a lot to like. You look at the game by game and like the log. He doesn't. I think he's had like 400-yard rushing games in his career. It's not a ton, but he's been in the end zone a lot, like 26, 27 times. I think we speculated a little bit last year about if this was a thunder and lightning combo with Quinshon and Travion, and really they were just two guys that could do everything. I think between James Peoples and then CJ Donaldson, you may have like a short yardage hammer with the potential to do more. But I don't know that as I'm looking at this going into spring ball next month, that like I'm projecting a true 50-50 split between Peoples and Donaldson. I don't know that would be feasible or optimal.
Meaning Peoples would have more?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you there. And I actually think if you look at Donaldson's career, so like his freshman year, he only had like 90 something carries, I think, but that was the best year he's had, and he's had some injuries since then. But I think he's actually, you won him in the 150 to 200 range over the course of a season, and maybe you get James Peoples up north of like 250 or something like that. I think Peoples is definitely the better running back, but Donaldson's got some skills. He's a big body. He does have good contact balance, I think, and I think I've said this before. Maybe when they first got him, he'll benefit from being in a more balanced offense than he was at West Virginia. The last 2 years, they weren't really all that good. All 3 years they weren't really that good at throwing the ball with him there. But the last two, especially, he's run into some loaded boxes quite a bit, which I don't think will be his reality at Ohio State.
Yeah, I also think that the one area where CJ Donaldson, before we really spiral off onto James Peoples, who deserves a lot of conversation on his own, but Donaldson is a guy that I believe will do a nice job of mitigating the loss of Will Howard in the running game, especially when it comes to short yardage stuff, because he is that hammer. And if Ohio State, the entire reason you go out and get a Will Howard, according to Ryan Day, was because he could get 4th and 2. And CJ Donaldson is the type of running back that behind an Ohio State offensive line should be able to get 4th and 2. He should be able to punch it in from the 1 yard line without getting lost in the sauce down there where all the bodies are. So I think that he's an interesting replacement, not just to complement James Peoples, but as a replacement for Will Howard and what he did in the running game. As far as Peoples goes, there's a reason that when Justice Haynes was entering the transfer portal from Alabama as the number 1 ranked running back in the country in the portal, former 5-star, blah, 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 Ohio State didn't pursue him. And it's because they believe James Peoples is the real deal, like ready to go superstar in waiting.
I think this is going to sound like a complaint, and I guess it's a half-hearted one. If there was anyone who lost in the way that Ohio State played at that slower tempo and methodical pace offensively throughout the regular season, it was James Peoples, because he would have been the beneficiary of a lot more carries. And Ohio State played closer games and they played at a slower tempo, and they had 2 superstar running backs. So like, it's one of the, there's no way to like be legitimately upset about it, but there would have been opportunities for him to be more involved. Because I think even when he got on the field in September, you're like, oh, well, could they use all 3 of these running backs? That's how impressive he was. And that's a lot to ask of a true freshman. And it wasn't really a necessity. But I think James Peoples goes in that category, Bill, of guys who we talk about. It's like, can't Ohio State get more younger players experience early and just put them in these games? And like defensively this year, they did that. Offensively, once they cut down on those snaps, it prevented someone like James Peoples from getting more experience than he might have been ready for.
Yeah, I think he ended up with like around 50 carries or so, which isn't bad for a true freshman in the kind of backfield in the room that he was in. But it didn't, just like the back half of the season just felt like he wasn't doing a whole lot other maybe some special teams from time to time. And like I get it. It's not like, you know, there weren't a ton of blowouts in there. And I guess like you could look back and say like, well, if you're intentionally playing slow and you know you're not going to be winning games 55-10, maybe you should be a little more willing to put a young guy out there. I like the Master Teague freshman season, where Master Teague was like the third leading rusher in the Big Ten, but like he only played like in the fourth quarter. I guess there was something out there like that for James Peoples this year, perhaps, but I still think about 50 carries and the amount of snaps he got is a pretty good baseline workload for a young guy. And I think he's awesome too. Like the majority of his work, I guess, came against teams that were rather overmatched playing Ohio State, but you can see the skill set. I think he's got really good vision. He's decisive. He's explosive. I, like everybody, think he reminds me a little bit of J.K. Dobbins, but maybe with a touch more physicality than J.K. had. So I think he is more than ready to pick up the mantle and be the number one back for this team. But to your point, I guess it would be a somewhat nicer to see him have a larger workload to feel a little more certain about that. But I'm fairly certain that he's ready to go.
How happy will James Peoples be that he gets to run behind the first team offensive line for once? Because that
yeah.
You know, I mean, we don't really know what he can be as that sort of bell cow back, because he didn't have an opportunity to run behind the starters ever. He did not play. He played in the Northwestern game, ran the ball 4 times, and then didn't play again until the Tennessee game, and was at the end when that game was over. So I imagine that he's someone who is just really eager for this opportunity. But the best thing that he got out of this last year was a chance to work with Travion and Quinshon and see what it takes to be that guy. So Peoples has everything that Ohio State fans should be excited to see as the running back for the Buckeyes.
Berm, they did get a couple of mid-year running backs into the program this winter. What's on the way there?
The big one is Bo Jackson. Obviously, Lamar Bo Jackson is his name, which is pretty wild.
Setting the standard pretty high with that name.
Yeah, for Bo, he had some injury issues throughout high school ball that I think kept his recruiting ranking muted a little bit. He's still a 4-star, top 15 type running back in the country. 6'1", 220 pounds, like big, physical, fast, freaky athletic, but he just had not been able to stay on the field consistently. He's arrived on campus along with Isaiah West from Philadelphia, St. Joe's Prep. Isaiah is a player that Carlos Locklyn was a big fan of. 3-star prospect coming out of high school, but in a lot of people's conversation around Ohio State, the Buckeyes had him way higher on their overall board nationally. I don't think he's going to be ready to go for Ohio State, though, until like August from a fully cleared physical standpoint, because he had an injury at the end of last year. And that is certainly terrible news for him, because Ohio State needs him, but also because I think he had the ability to compete with Bo Jackson to be that third guy pretty easily. And then in May, they'll bring in Turbo Rogers from Alabama as a true freshman. Maybe more of a scat back slot type of guy. I don't want to call him a Curtis Samuel type. Maybe even going back to like Jordan Hall back in the late 2010. I think he's more that type of player, a guy who should contribute in the special teams in the return games. But he can play the slot. He can play running back. There's a lot of different things he can do. And the interesting thing I think about this group is that they're all very different players, but the fact that Isaiah West is not going to be available till probably August full time, the fact that Turbo Rogers isn't enrolling until June, it is entirely on Bo Jackson how much he wants to play this year. If he's able to stay healthy through the spring, I think he's physically talented enough to push CJ Donaldson to be the number 2 back, honestly. And you could see Donaldson be relegated into more of the Chip Trayanum specialty role. But I think that there's an opportunity there if Bo Jackson can stay healthy. And again, there's the Sam Williams-Dixon component, which we don't really know. He only had, I think, 7 carries or something like that for Ohio State this past season. But one of those was a really dynamic 31-yard rush that showed some speed and some wiggle. And then you have Rashad Cisse and you have
TC Caffey.
TC Caffey is good enough to be on scholarship pretty much anywhere in the country and missed last year. Is he a guy that is able to pick up the slack and be the third running back for Ohio State? There's a lot of moving parts, but once you get past James Peoples, I think that anything is on the table for the rest of that room.
Do you guys think they need one more?
Yeah, that's why I thought Sam Williams-Dixon, his decision, I thought was, I don't know, this will sound like hyperbole. I thought it was the strangest out of any portal defections that Ohio State had, given the opportunity that was in front of him and at that spot on the roster. Now it's February 10th right now, and you do have to be in school and taking classes somewhere. So I think that's a pretty big question that has to be answered for Sam Williams-Dixon, whether that's Ohio State or anywhere else. Like, we're pretty deep into the calendar. So if he's not somewhere else, it would seem to me like Ohio State would be the best spot, just as it was in December.
Yeah, I'm not terribly concerned ever with lack of experience at the running back position, because I do think it's the easiest position for young guys to play, but I kind of just think they would they need maybe another body, like an Ohio State caliber running back body, and Sam Williams-Dixon is that. I do think TC Caffey's that. It's good to mention him, because I was talking about this another time. Someone's like, that TC Caffey's gonna be back. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it's a good point, but I've gone back and forth. I'm like, they definitely need to go out and get one, or maybe they can figure something out if it's TC Caffey or Sam Williams-Dixon decides to stay. I'm just a little wary of Peoples, Donaldson, and then big old question mark after that. I think one more would make me feel a lot better about this position.
100%. And I think that is the beauty of, we complain a lot, or I do, about the calendar and everything and how college football is arranged and set up, but you're in a position where you can go through all of spring ball and really get a sense of what you have, depending on what Sam does, depending on how healthy Bo is. You can then on April 16th make a call to someone and say, hey, we need a running back. And I bet you there's people out there who would like to play football for Ohio State.
You know what? Here's the thing, Berm. You don't even have to wait till April 16th if you don't want to. Who's gonna stop you?
Well, I mean, April 16th is when a player could be, officially in the portal. But certainly, if
Mr. Rules guy over here,
if Ohio State is concerned on March 21st that they don't have what they need at running back, I would imagine that back channels get activated in that moment.
Got to activate the back channels. It's always important. Hey, we're gonna have a lot more position.
Can we talk one more thing? I think it's
sure.
This is completely not really Ohio State related, but kind of. Penn State is likely going to lose their running backs coach, Juwan Sider, to Notre Dame in the next day or two. How crazy is it that last year with Tony Alford and now Juwan Sider, the two guys who had recruited and developed relationships with the best running back rooms in America, both teams primed in position to make a national championship run, the running back coach is like, see you guys, I'm leaving. Is that wild, or am I just overlooking? Am I overreacting because I value relationships so much more than money?
It's pretty crazy. That Penn State running back room is pretty good. If you want to just hypothetically maybe eyeball a position group that could be right for the picking, if you need a running back, there's a couple of good ones there. It's pretty.
I think the tires were already kicked on one of those guys.
Yeah.
Well, but Penn State found a money tree and stopped a lot of things from being kicked in the last month and a half. But you never know how that changes things now. Should we fully expect Penn State to just offer a bunch of money to Carlos Locklyn?
Well, I mean,
I bet Carlos Locklyn gets a raise.
If Carlos Locklyn hasn't already received his raise, I'll be surprised by that. That part is funny, Berm. We're talking about 2 years in a row at the running back position, but also just the way that Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State seem to be living in this incestuous coaching world where that's their pool of candidates. Those are who we want. And there are three of the best programs in the country, so that makes sense. There are also three returning semifinalists and finalists from the college football playoff. And it's they've just branched into their own world, trying to give nothing but content to Kings of the North.
Yeah, it's like a sushi boat. It's like a sushi river where it just keeps rolling by you, and you're like, Uh,
I mean, even when Ohio State was looking for an offensive line coach, the first name you mentioned was at Notre Dame.
and the first name Bill mentioned was at Penn State.
Penn State.
So if you want to make a list, just look at who's on the coaching staff roster for those three programs. I bet they're going to be in demand, if not at their own school, by those other two.
Familiarity breeds familiarity, I guess.
That is the expression. So more position previews and reviews are on the way. We will not be at Roosters today, which is Monday. That show is going to be on Tuesday. We've got Zach Bourne and Bradley Robinson coming in on Tuesday for that show, so keep an eye on that. We got something special cooked up for the end of the week as well, as we start to tell the stories of the 2024 national champions. So big debut, big teaser. We start at the very top, a little hint and a spoiler of who's to come on that. An hour-long conversation with Ryan Day will be on the way later this week. But still a ton of content as we roll along here fully into the offseason now with the Super Bowl in the rearview mirror. No football games for a long time. That's sad, but we're still going to talk about football, and we're happy about that. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This has been the Podcast Daily for Monday. We'll talk to you later.